Make sure to go and check out all of our latest merch at paddockmerch.com. We've got loads of new designs and even more products coming all the time. With 2 or more items, you get 20% off using the code Paddock20. And if you remember, there's even bigger discounts available. Link is in the description.
Jay here for Stretford, Paddock, and this is the Tier 1 Transfer Podcast. Although we're not talking about transfers today, we're just talking about Manchester United and football in general. And we're joined by, of course, Ronaldo Brown, my co-host. How you doing?
It's been a while, isn't it?
It's been a while and we're in the studio. Feels like we've always done this. I know we've been in the studio, but we've got a guest, Daniel Taylor.
It's been a Zoom podcast previously, isn't it?
From The Athletic joins us. Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Nice to be here.
I think this is the first one we've actually been able to do in the studio because of COVID. We've had to do them over Zoom. But you've obviously covered Manchester United for The Athletic, amongst other things as well. How's it feeling as well? Do you sort of post-COVID back in the sort of swing of things, back in the game, covering that?
Yeah, to be honest, I've missed it more than I thought. My mates hate me because I
My mates hate me.
Well, basically, they just think I'm so blasé, but I'm probably going to come across very badly very quickly here.
Don't worry.
But Champions League trips and stuff, they could be quite taxing, kind of quite tiring and stuff. And I'd be saying to my mates, I've got to pop off to Paris or Munich this week, and my mates would be like, are you really complaining? But I'd be like, yeah, but you're tired. It's like, you have to get flights. It's all,
And it is work.
And then, but that's what I mean. After so many years, you get blasé about it. And this last 2 years, I've missed it big time.
Yeah.
Getting on a plane, going off to some European city and just watching a bit of Champions League football and stuff. And you kind of so in a way, it's been a bit of a jolt to realise, the job has certain privileges that maybe after a while I shouldn't get to. My mates will be shaking their head. I'm like, well, I get back on Thursday. In fact, I'm tired. It's the weekend.
It's easy getting on these flights and going to Milan.
Munich.
Do you know what I mean? It's not.
Should we start this again? If
you're not doing, make sure you check out The Athletic. Give them a subscribe as well. You can check out Daniel's work there. We're going to move on to some of the other stuff, but we may as well get the elephant in the room, as a certain manager would say, out of the way. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, at the time of recording this, because you never know what's going to happen, there was a story this morning, I think, from Laurie Whitwell in The Athletic, and saying that at the moment it looks like his job's safe.
Yeah.
How safe do you think his job is, following on from the recent results, especially the Liverpool one?
Right, he's very lucky, first and foremost. I mean, not the first time, really, either. I mean, if this was in Spain, if this was in Italy, if this was Chelsea or a different mindset, he'd have been gone. He'd have been gone probably before he wouldn't have even come to the press conference probably. So, I mean, you could go back to maybe that sort of period of the 6-1 to Spurs as well and say the same. So he's very lucky that United, United do see this kind of, it would go against everything they've said this last couple of years, that basically they're trying to build, they know there's going to be some bumps in the road and all these things about building from within. And so it would kind of go against, there's no appetite to sack him. They don't want to. But it's got to that point now. It's a bit like you're losing 5-0 at home to Liverpool. Liverpool are strolling around the last 20. That was almost like the worst bit of it. They were like, it was like almost like patronising, kind of like, okay, we've taken the piss. There's 2,000 or 3,000 Liverpool fans, rubbing it in. The ground's emptying. We're just going to knock the ball around now. And it's almost the sort of way they'd have treated a kind of a Norwich of the world. And it's beyond humiliation. It's like I've never, ever, ever... I came up to Manchester in 98. City were third division at that time. Never, ever seen a walkout at half-time. And someone sent me a picture of Peter, and it was literally at half-time, so it wasn't like... it wasn't like conveniently... put in afterwards, but it was the people in droves going up St Matt Busby Way, and I was like, I've never ever seen that. So he's extremely lucky to be keeping his job for now. Whether they're clearly talking about it. They're clear, as I say. I mean, he started this by saying, as it stands, I think it's a fluid situation. How many more can he take? What happens if they lose this week? They've got It's relentless, isn't it?
It's relentless.
They've got Man City the week after.
You got City.
Yeah.
You've got Obviously Spurs away, that's a different story. But you've got City. Then I think you've got I can't remember. You've got an easy game, but then not far on the horizon. Then you've got Chelsea and Arsenal away.
Yeah.
I don't know who it is that we play.
One of those
Is it Watford in between them?
Yeah, I think you've got Watford,
Yeah.
and then you've got Villarreal away, and there's the Chelsea and Arsenal games. I can't remember which ones one's at home, one's away. But it's not until you get to maybe December where there's an easy run.
Yeah.
So maybe that might be the time that they look at it.
It's difficult because the form for a proper big club, the Club of United's ambitions, which don't get me, the United's ambitions this season were to be authentic title challengers. This is sackable stuff, basically. No, I don't think anybody could be surprised or shocked or outraged if it happened. But the people, I don't think they want it to happen. That's the thing. It's kind of like, because it goes against what they've been, their entire model during the Solskjaer reign has been to kind of like to kind of rebuild the culture of the. And so if they suddenly went to a Conte, for example, he's obviously the name that's sort of dominating the kind of who's next. Then all of a sudden you've gone back to kind of, I think Gary Neville was trying to make this point, all of a sudden you've gone back to being that kind of, okay, we'll try Mourinho. They've tried everything, haven't they? They've tried Moyes, they've tried the building, they've tried Moyes on a 6-year contract. He got 10 months, wasn't it? But that was because he started it in the end of the previous season almost. They've tried the kind of, the Van Gaal thing, which, I mean, the Van Gaal, that was the worst football I've ever seen at United.
I agree.
I've always said, like, United, you go to every game at United, it's an occasion. It's like a proper, you feel like this. That was the only time I've gone to Old Trafford and stopped feeling that. It was like, I didn't have any real, like, kind of sense of occasion to it. It was just deadly dull, wasn't it? It was so hard to watch. Then I've tried Mourinho, but it kind of wasn't peak Mourinho, so maybe... I always felt like Mourinho was like soured by the Real Madrid experience, kind of. So, I can't lie, I can't be hypocritical. I used to say, Mourinho, this is a big, scary club, and Mourinho's a big, scary manager. Mourinho's going to be the guy. My slight mitigation, I suppose, is that I kind of meant that after Fergie, rather than Moyes, who basically shrank in the job. You could see it in his face; he was terrified. It's just, and Moyes is a man ordinarily with presence, but you could see, it's a big club, mate. It's just, it can only, so you need someone who can handle it. And I suppose, if Solskjaer does go, and it's, you can't look at these coming games and think, oh well, they might turn it around with a, they might do Man City or something. You're sitting there thinking there's going to be more punishment coming here. So then. It's difficult for United because then they just almost have to start again because Conte isn't that kind of.
It's a complete change.
Yeah, it's a massive thing. So you look at who else is out there, and Zidane's out there as well. But these are all kind of 2 or 3 year managers, if you know what I mean. They're not kind of like someone that they wanted to. So don't get me wrong, this is what Chelsea do, and people, including myself in the past, have sort of sneered at it and stuff, but. You'd love what Chelsea have won the last 10 years, wouldn't you?
They've been the most successful English team in the past 20 years, haven't they?
So really? They do it in that way of being ruthless, and it's unpleasant sometimes. You see, because that people are getting, they will brief against managers at some points, and you kind of know the manager's being sacked before he is. So it's not what you'd call the United way, or even though, funnily enough, that did happen with Moyes. Moyes did find out through the media first that he was getting sacked, which obviously wasn't ideal for him, to put it mildly. But Chelsea, it's a very different mentality. But in a weird way, after years of kind of rolling your eyes at it, you almost look at it now and think, well, it's working for them. Yeah. It's not working for United. United are trying to be this club that gives 6-year contracts and puts their arm around Solskjaer and stuff, but it's not exactly. It probably all comes back to we all thought it'd be hard after Fergie. We didn't probably realise how hard, like it's replacing Fergie. When you look back now, you think Moyes was that was the I saw some clips, some excerpts from. Patrice Evra's new book, and he was talking about, the players just weren't having Moyes, and the reason weren't having Moyes is because he wasn't Fergie.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It seems like every manager's got to deal with the shadow of Fergie.
I don't think he did himself any favours.
No, he didn't. He didn't. And to be fair, you'd think by now it would have moved on from that, but it's still, there's a different group of players, but then they're still questioning the manager in a way that, I'm sure they slag off Fergie sometimes and moan about him and stuff like that, but they also knew that he was the ultimate, and they don't see Solskjaer in that respect, because Solskjaer's never won a trophy. Solskjaer, with respect to the guy, and he's, there's parts of what Solskjaer's done that's been very good. You can't. There's been times where there's some of the records, like away performances and stuff, been amazing. What he did when he took over was, but it's, I don't know. He's not. He came from Cardiff and moulded it ultimately, and he got the job. And he got the job because of what he did in '99, really, because they wanted someone.
DNA.
Yeah, and it's maybe that's a little bit harsh in to say, and ignores the good stuff that he's done, and he has repaired and brought a lot of the club. He's sort of brought a fractured club back together again, but it's not working at the moment, is it? And I'm not sure he's ever going to be the man. If you look through the Premier League clubs, how many of those clubs would swap their current manager for Solskjaer? And
I think that's what a lot of people have said.
Yeah.
A lot of people have kind of played with the idea that if Ollie was to leave United or to be sacked, which of a Premier League side would actually take him on as manager?
Yeah. Well, I saw people saying on Twitter yesterday that he'd probably end up being the Norway manager, and it's a bit like, well, fair enough, but that is almost a bit of an indictment in itself, because it's a bit like, well, what does that mean, that the Evertons, Aston Villas, West Hams of the world don't want you? And I'm not sure not absolutely sure they would. I'm not. This probably sounds a little bit overly negative, because I do think he's done good things there.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's. It'd be interesting to see where he goes from here, because I'm not quite sure which sort of type of club would want him. It's a strange fit for where he'd be next. It's. This is probably sounds, but it feels more like a kind of a Burnley almost.
No.
If Sean Dyche left,
even then, that seems like a strange fit.
Well, if Sean Dyche, someone that kind of like, a family sort of togetherness of this, and I feel like I've been a bit harsh to him there.
No, I listen.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I listen, understand, and we all love Ole Gunnar Solskjaer for what he achieved as a player. And you're right to point out, he has done good things.
Yeah.
Like, he got the job permanently on the back of what he did.
Amazing run.
Yeah.
And there's been, listen, I'd be a hypocrite. I've written a piece in the past saying, at the height of when things were going well, that basically, Edward would give him a contract. Maybe this was the one thing that Edward Wood's done that, I can't be hypocritical, or could be, but I choose not to be. The one good thing that Edward Wood's done is to, because there's continuity, and at that time, it was all going upwards, and you think, but in a way, I always think like managers can lose form as well as players, and basically, if after a while if the players are starting to question them as well, and which I think is probably happening.
Yeah, it's definitely can see it.
There was a Solskjaer's been a popular guy in the dressing room compared to some of them. I mean, they really disliked Mourinho. I've spoken to one player in particular about the Van Gaal era, which just sounds like an absolute.
We had Rafael de Silva, didn't we, on the channel? And he told us a story about Van Gaal, and he just said. He said he's crazy. He said he's not just in football. He said he's one of the most crazy people I've ever met.
Yeah, I mean, I think off record the stories are even worse.
Right.
It's kind of like.
I think Rashford has a little bit of love for him, though.
Yeah.
So I don't think when if this ends as we think it probably will end, I think you'll get people saying where Solskjaer maybe where it went wrong, but I don't think you're going to get that vitriolic. Poison spreading in a way, even if these stories are true, like, as I say, I've heard some of this. To be fair, some of the stories I heard about Van Gaal was when he was still there. The players briefing about how disliked he was and how people wanted to leave basically because of Van Gaal. So it isn't that situation now. But I think they are looking at him, questioning him, thinking, it's a big dressing room, isn't it? There's big personalities there. You know, they've added Ronaldo, there's Pogba, there's, you know, Varane. These are big name players. I just wonder if they're looking at him. And, you know, they'll all be talking between themselves about what's going wrong. And footballers tend to want an excuse, and it's normally the manager that's the excuse.
You mentioned Ronaldo there, and I know you've written about Ronaldo recently. How much of a part does that play in Solskjaer's future, or what's going on? The fact you've got a player like Ronaldo, when he arrived, we were all buzzing as United fans, especially when it looked like he was going to go to City, and then he comes. But with that, there's obviously expectation there.
Yeah.
And you know, you've seen all the videos of him doing all that during the Liverpool game. He's obviously unhappy. Yeah. I mean, how much does that play a part in what's going on?
Definitely tip the scale, and
yes. Well, to be fair, Ronaldo was always did that, but he did that in the era before social media kicked in properly. Ronaldo was like always flapping his arms about, and I mean, he was like, I mean, he's kind of eliminated it from his game mostly, but he was a huge diver. He would be having. I remember going to Fulham and him having massive hissy fit. And he was the most entertaining part of the game. His hissy fit lasted pretty much the entire first half. You know, in his last season at United, when he didn't want to beat United, he wanted to have gone the year before. His histrionics were incredible, but it was if you think that Twitter really kind of took off around sort of 2009, 2010 and accelerated on, it was all, so all these kind of like hand gestures and him throwing his arms about, that gets accentuated more now because of social media and stuff. But he always did that, and he never pressed all this stuff. I don't want to sound like a heathen here, but I've seen better tactical experts than me talking about his lack of pressing and how Ronaldo's never pressed.
Never done that.
He's never been the guy who, you just read Gary Neville's autobiography or think back to Gary Neville used to. I remember Gary Neville dragging his fingers down his face during games because it was so frustrated that this guy would not help him out and stuff. And they you had to realise the brilliance that he had. Let him go and do all that, and the rest of the team compensate for him. Ronaldo's never going to be the guy who presses from the front like Firmino or someone. So if you want him in the team, you want to sign him, you got to understand that from the word go, rather than like a month in. I don't think it's fair to blame Ronaldo's lack of pressing for the way the team. I mean, I was looking at the figure. He scored 6 in 9 games. If the team were doing okay, everyone would be saying he's living up to his part. Yeah. It's not his fault that Maguire and Shaw and others are capitulating. It's not. I think there's bigger problems than. I mean, like, if you took into about pressing, like the clips I've seen recently, Greenwood's pressing, for example, on the right. Greenwood's not a natural for that role and stuff, but I just don't understand it. I think Ronaldo's a bit of an easy target for this, and I think in the black and white, he scored 6 goals in 9. I don't think he's, it's not like he's looking for his first goal, and you're looking at him thinking he's only in the team on what he's done in the past. So at the same time, that said, it has coincided with his arrival that this deterioration has happened. So I do wonder if there's some sort of imbalance or whatever. But then equally, you look at it, and there are players individually who've dramatically lost form. Like I say, Maguire, sure, you can't blame the left back on Ronaldo, and Maguire sort of being so vulnerable that he's going through one of his accident-prone phases, isn't he? So I don't know. I can't blame Ronaldo myself, but is it coincidental that it's happened?
Especially with that little bit of controversy that ensued when Ollie did kind of put his foot down and he dropped Ronaldo for the Everton game, and the controversy surrounding that. I think that might have been further tipping the scale towards. I feel like just looking at United now, you can kind of tell a little bit, especially when it comes to the Ronaldo and Ollie dynamic. I'm not sure how much Ronaldo actually fancies him. When you've got such a big legend and you've got such a big character within the team that doesn't, and then other players are looking at him not really fancying him on a job.
Well, that's a good shout, because Ronaldo, essentially, he needs his ego fluffing. Yeah. He needs to be the main man. Probably wants to play every game. Probably wants to take every penalty, every free kick. And in a way, has Ollie had to kind of show that, but I'm the manager, because people are kind of laughing, aren't they? People are saying
People
that Ronaldo's big, and so Ronaldo's maybe not got his way. I can see that dynamic. I can see Ronaldo also looking at him thinking, I'm 36. I've played for the best managers in the business, so I'm not quite sure when I look at you that you are that guy. But then I can't say that of any authority. It's a theory, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can't sit here and say, this is what I've heard, or this is what I've been briefed from the camp, and this is, so it's something I could believe, but it's not. I can't genuinely, hand on heart, say this is what is coming out of the camp, and it's a danger to I can believe it though.
Yeah, if you're looking at Ronaldo as a bit of a luxury player, like in terms of you need to accommodate for him with, like, tactically, some people are suggesting that if you're looking at United's team, there might be a bit of an imbalance in terms of there's too many players like that. And you've got the likes of Bruno Fernandes, who runs and does what he wants. You've got Pogba. You've got all these attacking players. You've got Cavani. You've got Greenwood now. You've got Rashford coming back into the fold. You think it's not all on Ollie or Ollie's inability to kind of see how to structure the team? Or do you think that United's just got too much of an imbalance in terms of the players that they've got?
Yeah, well, that's spot on. I mean, basically, he as the manager has to be the guy who works out the best system for them, and so far that hasn't happened. You can see it hasn't happened because of the number of goals they concede, the number of chances they concede, number of times where they seem
Disjointed.
Disjointed. There's no kind of cohesion or fluidity between the defence and midfield and attack. So that is the bit where you want the coaches and the manager to solve, and that is where
it's going wrong.
You can't see it. And is there is there some big shout? Like he told us there's going to be a big shout, and I was thinking, well, is it going to be Pogba that makes way? But there isn't really a great history of Fernandes and Ronaldo. Is that dynamic kind of, Fernandes, when you watch him for the national team, Fernandes sort of, it's not like the two of them are the two stars together, so maybe that's the tricky dynamic.
Exactly. It's too many things.
It's difficult. I mean, also, obviously I go and watch City and Liverpool as much as United, and the difference between, when they lose the ball, it's almost like that old kind. I mean, I'm sure Pep brought this over from Barcelona. They had this thing of you got to get back within five seconds, and basically they hunt the ball down. And United. So we're talking about Ronaldo. Does Ronaldo press? Do United press?
It's like it almost feels to me like some do. So you mentioned Greenwood against Liverpool. You saw him at one point.
It's not a collective press.
No.
So if it's not a collective press, it doesn't work.
No.
So because basically, if one goes, then it just doesn't. It needs all of them to be tuned in. That's where it comes back again to the coaching. Yeah. There's times where United don't look brilliantly coached. Someone at City said to me, like, one of Solskjaer's mistakes is like he's got inexperience around him. Like Walter Smith died today, isn't he? It's like, but Fergie, he brought in Walter. He had Archie Knox. Fergie would quite often bring in people that were, you'd see as kind of veterans of the, kind of old timers in a way. Not all the time, but he would often have experience. Whereas, I'm not scapegoating, but United have got like, I look at Carrick and McKenna on the bench, to sort of like think like, there's not a great deal of, Carrick's just gone there essentially from playing basically, and it's kind of, I kind of almost would have expected him to sort of start off in the academy or something, or stay there for a number of years basically, but there's not a wise old figure in the dugout basically. Is the point I'm trying to make.
Do you know what one issue may be when it comes to whether Solskjaer comes and goes? I don't know how much they will be thinking about it, but it's because when Mourinho went, the huge payout, you were speaking to me about it, Jay.
Yeah,
that happened to him and his coaching staff.
Was it about 90 million or something in total for him and his coaching staff?
Yeah. With Solskjaer just signing a 3-year contract, it's like...
Yeah. Also, I just completely ignored Mike Phelan there as well, didn't I?
No.
But you know my point. I mean, they've just given these contracts out.
3 years, yeah.
This is what I mean. So it's this is what there comes a point where I think United are going to have to, if they keep losing, they're going to have to.
Yeah.
As I say, I mean, Jay started by saying as it stands, and it is almost one of these
No,
where you kind of feel like you might leave this building in a minute, and things might have changed. They might,
It only takes one swing.
It'd be hugely naive not to think that they, even if they don't want to, that they are now they're going to be looking at who's available, the pros and cons of all these different types of people, because the United fans, the match-going fans anyway, because there's a difference, isn't there, between match-going and social media fans, but match-going fans are not going to turn on Solskjaer like you would get at other grounds, but then walking out of the stadium is almost a way of, it's a mutiny in another sense.
I've seen a little bit of a shift as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't speak to all the match-going fans, but a lot of match-going fans I've spoken to and I stand with, and a lot of them go ways as well, who were usually the last section of the fan base to turn on a manager or to doubt a manager or openly question him or whatever, are beginning to say...
Yeah.
Because it hurts that, you mentioned earlier that, 5-0 at home to Liverpool hurts.
Yeah,
it's
there's a definite shift. When I say turn, I mean they're not going to be singing his
he's still got his name sung in the and you've seen the images and the videos of people waiting outside. I will just say as well, thoughts with Walter Smith's family. You mentioned that he's passed away, played a role at Manchester United, lifting the FA Cup, of course, in 2004.
I think people forget he was at United.
I know he was.
But I didn't know him so well, but when I went over to Merseyside a couple of times, the press over there loved him.
Yeah,
he was a brilliant one for like having an off the record half an hour, great storyteller, and made it his business to kind of know the journalists there. So I kind of be slightly jealous because. Obviously
you had a running with Fergie, didn't you, Daniel? I mean, bring it up.
Well, don't get me wrong. I think he wouldn't take any shit, but obviously. I think he was a bit more like kind of would go out for a drink with them occasionally, whereas we would have loved that relationship with Fergie, but we didn't often have that, if you know what I mean. So, but they all talked about Walter as being great, but I saw it announced by Rangers, and funny enough, I looked on Everton's Twitter, and it's a bit like, hurry up, but he's a Rangers man essentially, but then he was at Everton for a lot of years, and people do forget. He and Fergie were obviously pretty close, and Fergie brought him in. When did he bring him in? I remember
just the end. Was it towards the end of 2003, 2004 season?
I think it was a difficult time for United. Was that when Mourinho was?
Well, it was the year that Porto knocks us out of the Champions League. I think, I might be wrong, so forgive me if I'm... I think he was in the dugout for when that happened.
Right.
I might be wrong. But I know it wasn't a great season, but this shows you what it was like under Fergie. It wasn't a great season, we just won the FA Cup. Whereas now, I think I'd bite your hand off if you said we're going to win the FA Cup this year. You mentioned briefly there Ed Woodward earlier. Now, he's scheduled to leave at the end of the year, is it? And is there... I mean rumblings that it might be carrying on, or what?
He was telling people when it all kicked off beforehand, he was telling people he was going to leave in the summer. And also, if you're going to leave, you might as well leave. It's like, people... If you're building relationships, but you're going yourself, what's the point of Ed Woodward building relationship with... What's the point of him with Mino Raiola? Because what's the point of Edward trying to have this association with, I don't know, Mendes and people like that? But Ed, you're leaving in a bit, and you're going to have then it's going to be somebody else's job. I don't know. The whole thing is such a weird story because, as I say, he was telling people he was going in the summer, then it's gone so quiet. I know that United put out it was going to be later, but Ed was saying it was going to be.
All right, he's going to see the season
because I think he thought, and also. He's leaving because he felt his relationship with the Glazers was broken after he went against them effectively, or he didn't want to go with them, put it that way. So it's all very weird that he's kind of still there. We're told there's going to be this, Richard Arnold's going to come in. I don't know. I think everyone's in agreement. It's not just Solskjaer that's been the problem the last few years. They've got... Adam Crafton, my colleague, sort of said it very well yesterday. I was listening to it on the way in and saying there's so many people at United who've kind of been learning on the job, like coaches, but also people in the boardroom. How many years were we saying United needs to have a proper proper director of football, like someone that, because Ed didn't want to do it, because Ed loves doing the deals himself, but it's not like he hasn't got other stuff to do, and he's been shown over years that he's got a lot of those deals wrong, or he's it's not always been a particularly happy transfer windows, have they? Some of them.
No.
So,
just seems a bit of a shambles. Moving on from Manchester United, because like you mentioned, you don't just cover Manchester United, you cover a lot of other things. You've written quite extensively about sort of some of the racism we've seen recently after the Euros, especially. I mean, you covered a little bit of that when we saw Saka, we saw Sancho and Rashford, of course, getting racially abused online following, missing the penalties in the final, and I think you covered one of the court cases there. Was it one of them?
Well, we actually did a few of them. Yeah. Because we just thought it'd be, I suppose, listen, it's hard to kind of lump all these people together, but we thought it'd be quite interesting to go and see these people and who they are. And when I say these people, we went to 4 court cases, and obviously the numbers are vast compared to that, but you do get a bit of a picture. I mean, as I say, I can't say this about every single one of these people, but you do almost sort of think that maybe they dislike their own lives.
Right, okay.
So they're trying to kind of like
filled with hate.
Yeah, so they're trying. So because of that, I remember this isn't to do with sort of racist attacks, but social media. I remember when so I did the story of Andy Woodward, the first player who came out about being sexually abused, and sort of started that whole scandal, and he was basically getting attacked by Crewe fans on Twitter, and they were sending him like I mean, they set up a fake Barry Bonnell account, and they were sending him like horrible messages and stuff, and then two of them, as a father and son, they basically ended up lying and blaming each other, and then that gets into the realms of perverting the course of justice.
Right.
And so that's automatic prison. So if they basically just put hands up, they'd have got the same as, they'd probably got a suspended sentence or a fine or a warning. But once you start going into the realms of lying to the courts, so they both went to prison for Christmas a few years ago. And in court, it was basically explained that basically their lives were so kind of, they had very tangled, bad family situations, and basically they were unhappy. They admitted they were unhappy with their own lives. So they wanted to make somebody else unhappy, and that's how it felt going to these court cases with these racists, basically, who were getting all sorts of different sentences, that they wanted to almost like spread a bit of their own unhappiness into, to other people. That's how it felt anyway. It's only 4 court cases. It could have been probably 4,000 court cases and maybe a different pit. But yeah, we just wanted to examine it a bit more closely, really, and just sort of see who these people were. As you can imagine, they weren't very impressive people.
Yeah, kind of just projection, innit? A little bit of self-hatred.
Yeah, it felt that way.
It feels difficult to even excuse it, almost, but you just got to, because sometimes racism seems so unfathomable, you're kind of looking at it thinking, why? Do you know what I mean? It's one of them where I'd actually be interested to go to court case and see what these people are like, because it would obviously be different from seeing it. We talk about social media, and obviously people have this they have this protective barrier when they can do it behind a computer screen or behind their smartphones, and actually seeing them face to face would be interesting, because I can pretty much imagine, like you said, they will be a certain type of character where they just seem like they're unhappy within themselves. Yeah,
I think that there's, and also there's a level of stupidity, and they're not the brightest people, uneducated is the word, isn't it? And it's listen, I'm a Forest fan, and like on Facebook, sort of signed up to a few of the groups, and and some fan groups, and there's a Forest Old Boys site, which is like the old lads that used to watch Forest when Forest were good, which is a long time ago now. But some of the stuff they put there is brilliant. And then someone put up a post about taking the knee, and all these kind of this enjoyable Facebook site quickly degenerated into this thinly disguised, on the part of some of them, sort of thinly disguised racism. Basically, I looked at their pages, and all of us, it's not a surprise they've got kind of, they're also talking about immigrants coming over, and it's a bit like it's horrific, and this is why social media. It's really, to me, like kind of. It's so much worse. It feels so much worse to me, like, because people have got this, and then other people have seen that. It's like a way. It's a veil for them to, you know. But I mean, I'm sure the figures are worse than they were.
What do you feel like has to be done about it on social media? Because I know there's a little bit of controversy about people saying that there's a fine line between these people not being able to hide behind a computer screen, but then again the kind of privacy issue with the fact that they're saying that people should have their IDs or whatever before they.
But listen, I'd love that to happen. First of all, logistically, I just don't. I'm not sure it can. That you know, I just think it's, you know, it's a global. It's not just like it's. If Twitter was a UK site and only UK people could use it, then maybe it'd be easier. But it's not. It's a global site. You know, people talk about like getting rid of words. You know, making certain words. Then people put asterisks in, or there's millions of words that are that could be used in an offensive way. I mean, if you look at, I think we're going to talk about it in a bit. If you look at what John Terry said to Anton Ferdinand, that wasn't the N word or word that Twitter could phase out. But even if they did, people would still spell it in a different way, or they'd do a number one rather than the I or something.
Like you see when you see it reported, when you saw that wrote out, it wasn't wrote out a lot. Big newspapers, it was asterisked out. But you can see what it meant.
This is what I mean, because I'd love to have an answer.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we all probably agreed that the social media companies don't seem to, that, you know, they're very good at paying lip service to it. And I mean, what kind of kills me when I, you know, it's like when you see proper hardcore racism on there, and people reporting it, and then you get this automated message saying, "Oh, sorry, this hasn't, crossed our threshold." And you're like, what do you want? What do you want? Like a death threat? And like, I'm like, you know, picture of themselves outside your house with like.
It's mad in it as well when, like, you know, if you tweet a bit of footage from the game,
it's gone.
It's gone like that. Copyright. I've had that. I've tweeted a clip and it's like copyright. We'll have that. And then if you report a racist post, which is like you say is overtly racist, like 3 weeks later you get no.
And the other thing that I've found is that writing these pieces is never fun, because you write it and you kind of feel like, okay, I've written something hopefully for the greater good, and your replies are just like hammered, you know, and I just wonder, like, you look at these people, it's like a lot of them, you sort of like, it's a name, it's like David 063425, it's like almost like so many names, it's like, and they're weird codes, and you think, are these like real people? It's like a kind of cartoon picture. It's like, this is what I mean. I've got this it's just a personal thing. I used to engage on Twitter loads, you know, when I was 2008 to 2012, I would chat to people and, you know, try to be funny and try to be kind of, you know, like a Twitter. I can't now, because it's just like, it's overwhelmingly bad. But I just a few years, I just stopped replying to people that don't even put their real name and like who they really are on there, because it's like, I'm not talking to it. Why should I engage with like a cartoon picture?
Yeah, there's a
caricature in it.
Yeah, it can get a bit draining.
And don't get me wrong, a lot of these people are real, but it's a bit like, I'm putting my real picture, my real name, and who I work for on there. But there is no rule that you have to do that. But it's just a personal thing with me But if someone who I see doing that, I will ask a question, then I will but I just can't be arsed these days, you know. And it's just it's, you know, I mean, it's draining, isn't it? You know,
it is draining. I don't know what you mean. I used to be a bit like, I used to engage and argue. I remember pulling my car over once on a school run to argue with someone.
Sometimes I've done that, and you go to bed thinking, and you kind of get a bit too ingrained in it. Like, and I do see some journalists who seem a bit obsessed with Twitter, and there must be like on about nearly approaching 500,000 tweets now.
Yeah,
but it is very valuable for getting stuff out there, and I did enjoy that interaction. Yeah. But when that interaction becomes, if I said something like, you know, Old Trafford's a big stadium, I'd have people, you know, slating me. For saying, you can't
say anything like "good morning" or "it's not good."
Ratio.
Yeah,
and the way I am, and I shouldn't be, I can't help but look, and then it's like, and I could get, if I wrote a piece and get like 100 people saying that was brilliant, thank you, and then one person saying that was shit, you are a joke.
Yeah.
So that's the one person you think about, and like some people like Ollie Kay, my colleague, is like kind of just washes over him, whereas I, like most people, I think, basically would end up going to bed thinking about that one person.
No, is that because are you quite self-critical? Are you like a bit of a
maybe
perfectionist in a sense, or is it?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I reckon if I was a footballer, I'd definitely be one of those. I need an arm around my shoulder. If I got if I got a bollocking, I'd shrivel.
We won't be like someone who'd want to play for Mourinho.
Yeah, no, that's when I'd disappear. If that, I'd be stood at the side with my shirt sleeves pulled over my hands and stuff.
You mentioned there about John Terry, and you did a piece on it recently, the 10-year sort of anniversary, if you can call it that, of the Anton Ferdinand racism issue. I was reading that piece, and you spoke about Kick It Out and how they've had more funding. I think there's like is it a dedicated hate crime officer as well? There's been some changes, is the point I'm getting to. Do you think there's been enough changes to try and combat racism in football, not just the social media side, but the actual, physical side, if you call it that?
It's a good question. To be fair to them, so like I watched that Graham Taylor documentary last night. I don't know if you saw it, but they had a clip of the FA, a board meeting of the FA. It was like, oh my god,
I've seen one of them before.
Could you? Yeah. It was just like one of these things. Like, did nobody notice this at the time? And the average age is about 97. There's literally, I mean, it's just.
It's like the Bert Millichip days.
It's just, it's just, just basically a load of old white-haired bloke. It's like that. It's
generational thing, isn't it?
It's like the two blokes off the Muppets and in the theatre.
Was it Waldorf and Sadler?
Yeah, but there's like 10 of them or whatever. So, to be fair to the FA, they have spent a lot of time trying to make it a bit more of a more diverse employer. Things like that. The PFA have done the same. It used to always do my head in that everyone used to slate Kick It Out as being weak. So Rio Ferdinand killed them in his book about the John Terry situation, and just Rio's got obviously a hell of a lot of stock in football. So him doing that, Kick It Out basically became a bit of a punch bag. My argument would always be that Kick It Out are funded. Kick It Out's funded. They can if we want Kick It Out to be a big, strong organisation, they need funding. So at that time, and for many years, their funding was, the Football League gave them nothing. So like 72 clubs, they were expected to look after everyone, but they gave them nothing. The PFA gave them 100 grand a year, FA, or just under 100 grand a year. FA and Premier League did the same. Now, Premier League, as we know, is like, worth billions of pounds. Yeah. So I worked it out. I haven't got the maths here, but it was like 0.0001, probably less, probably more noughts on that, to be honest. They gave them jack shit, basically.
Yeah.
And then that was their money. So basically, there were times where Herman Ousley would have to go cap in hand to them and say, so he said this in his piece, said, look, we ran out of money. We were constantly running out of money. We couldn't afford train trips to go up to see people. And so it's no wonder they weren't the organisation we want them to be, because they ultimately, as with most things in football and life, it does come back to money. Yeah. And they had none. So they were pretty, weak would be one word for it. And also there is this strange dynamic that because you're funded by the FA, it's hard for them. Well, it's hard. It's not impossible, and they had to do it occasionally. But it's hard for them to slate the football authorities because they're relying on those football authorities for the money. So, and there'd be times, and Herman said to me in this piece that you mentioned, that the Football League would say to them, why should we give you money? You keep criticising us. So that is the mentality.
It's almost catch-22 situation.
Yeah. So the Football League, can you believe, the Football League would literally give them nothing, but they would be expected to cover 72. And they also made the point, was a lot of those clubs were some of the places where the worst offending would happen. Yeah. You'll have to decide for yourself which clubs they mean by that, but so it is improving, but it started off from such a low position that it's catching up in a way. So I wouldn't really say we're in a great position right now. You know, yeah, the police have got like a dedicated hate crime officer now, but you know they can't even get a reply from social media companies sometimes. So it's not. It's you know, it feels like
so deflating. When
there's
you
good
hear
there's
things
good
like
people out there
Yeah.
fighting it, but the numbers are overwhelming, and it feels, you know, feels. It's not like you couldn't really say like we're on top of it, could you?
No, I don't think so at all. Another story, you've mentioned it as well. The one that you broke a few years ago was the sort of the offside trust and the Andy Woodward story about abuse in football. Just going back to that, how did that come about? How did your involvement in that come about? Because I first read it when you was at the Guardian.
So
you wrote it in the Guardian. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say that it was the culmination of a 3-year investigation that I single-handedly undertook.
Yeah.
But it was actually Andy Woodward and I have got a mutual acquaintance, and Andy wanted to do his story with this other guy, and the guy was like, "This is your thing," and kindly enough was kind enough to recommend me as the journalist that he thought could do it. So that's so Andy was a stranger to me when I first met him, and you know, all those you know, they're similar age to me. The Barry Bennell's, you know, I mean, when I say victims, the ones I know, you know, there's hundreds upon hundreds of them. You know, I mean, there's still 100 complaints that have gone into the police that have never even got as far as court because we don't deal with mass offending in this country. So if it was in America, you know, you can have 500 complainants in America in the court case over there, but here, you know, it has to. I think his biggest one was 12, and there's like, you know, there's 100 others thinking, why am I not getting my day in court? So, but yeah, you know, I mean, a lot of this was all during the 80s, 90s, so this is kind of, these are lads that I can identify with, you know, kind of my era, you know, and I'm good mate, you know, like I've become good mates with a lot of them, you know. You know, I think doing stories like that is a kind of a bond, you know, it's not just something you do and then sort of move on. It's not a transfer story, is it? You know, these. So it was. I don't know if you saw the BBC documentary this year that came up. You know, it was rewarding, I suppose, in a sense to have done that. You know, you can't beat the job satisfaction of seeing a guy get 31 years in prison for a story you've covered. You know, it's now 36 years. He said there's been more since then.
And just on that, there's a court case going on in a minute with Barry Bennell where, I mean, this is pretty extraordinary that he could be called by Manchester City to sort of speak up on behalf of them.
It's not even he could be called. He is being.
Right,
he has been called.
Yeah, he has been called by City.
There's a bit of nuance to it, and basically, Man City are the defendant, so he is giving evidence on behalf of the defendant. He's basically City's witness. City are very keen for it to be known that basically he was called by the solicitors. So basically City are being represented by their insurance company now because this could be a big payout. So basically the solicitors are the ones that have called him. Ultimately, so it's not City's own solicitors, but ultimately those solicitors are representing the defendant, which is City. So I know that's a bit confusing, but there's a slight nuance to it. It's not that Man City have written to him directly. It's not like, but ultimately, he is in. You know, even the QC that's representing City in the High Court yesterday was talking about it in those terms, that he has been called as a witness for City, and like you say, it's extraordinary. And can you imagine being one of the many victims of Barry Bennell, you know, raped, molested over, you know, in some cases hundreds of times. Then you come forward as you've been asked to, you know, you get him to prison. You kind of think that's the last we'll ever hear of him. At least he's going to die in prison. You know, we've done all we could possibly do. And this is like, you know, obviously I've studied Bennell, and this is so up his street. You know, it's kind of like his way of control. His, you know, he didn't have to be. He could have said no, but you know, he's already given them a statement. December the 6th, he's going to be appearing in the High Court via video link to answer questions, and it's going against the players basically. So the players are trying to win some compensation, and he's going against them. And it's kind of like, is this your last sort of piece of control over these poor guys? You know, like, you know, because a lot of it with him was this sort of warped sort of control and enjoyment of being the guy that has the last word, you know, and is this your last fuck you, everyone? You know, basically, you know, that's how it feels, you know, because he didn't have to do that, and you'd think that if he had a semblance of decency, well, listen, it's December the 6th. If he comes out and says, "Yeah, City knew all about it," you know, if he might throw City under a bus. I doubt it, because it's City that are calling him, and there's nothing in parts of his statement yesterday that we read out of the High Court that sort of made me think that. But so essentially, he is going to be trying to, or so it seems, chop down these poor people that he abused at the knees, and the figures are, you know, for standard damages, the figures are like between 50 and 100 grand. Basically, you think this has killed their lives. You know, a lot of these. There's not one of them. Even the people that have done really well, there's not one of them that is over this. No. There is no. People use the word closure. There is no closure on what's happened. Your childhood barriers get taken away like that. You know, they've all got massive. There's people killed themselves. There's a number of suicides. There's, you know, massive relationship issues. People that have turned to drink, alcohol, crime, people have gone to prison, people have just lost the plot, you know, basically. Yeah. And, you know, people who I still know now who have periods where they're in a really bad way, you know. Like one of the wives of someone I know said to me when they went on holiday, they always used to, basically, she used to always have to ask ahead to get like a low, a first or ground floor room, because she didn't want a high room where there might be something that he could throw himself off the balcony, you know. It's kind of, you know, it's a daily battle for some of them, you know, even however many years on. So can you imagine what it's like for them that Bernal is being wheeled out on behalf of the club where they once had dreams of making it, to give evidence against them? You know, it's a really... Can't
imagine what that feels like.
It's a really... likewise, you know, you can't really even put yourself in those shoes, but, you know, it's not a pleasant place to be, is it, to think that?
No, it's not. I was speaking earlier, I interviewed a couple of players that have been through that on the back of your work, and like Paul Stewart and David White and one or two others, and very brave, obviously, to speak out about it. We've seen him from Patrice Evra. I know it's a different sort of, you know, it's not associated with Bernal, but he's been speaking out about it as well, and, you know, it's obviously something that's happened, and, you know, it's just when you hear that and you hear that what these people have gone through and the way it's being handled now, you just think, how's it come to this?
Yeah, it's scary though, because for all the people that we do know about, there probably is quite a few more that even
there's loads. There's loads. There's loads, and because with Bernal, Bernal was at City before Crewe, so basically these lads with City are now in the kind of mid to late 40s mostly, or a couple of them in the early 50s. And then with Crewe, they're kind of like late 30s to mid 40s and stuff. That's the age where you normally you might have young kids and you might have elderly parents. So if you're going to come forward, can you imagine the conversations you've got to have? Yeah. Especially if you're going to go public. So there's loads. I've had contact with, I know so many names of people inside football, outside football, that have just are watching and have got full admiration for everyone that's come forward, but it just isn't for them, because it doesn't suit their... And you've got to put absolute respect for that, because it's like... And also, a lot of them were told to come forward, and they did do, and then they didn't get the day in court anyway. They got what's known as the NFA, no further action from the police. So they've
got thoughts on that.
Yeah, they've basically, but can you imagine there? They've had to do all that process of telling the police what happened, you know, coming, you know, reveal, you know, that's reliving
reliving that.
Yeah, massive trauma of all that, and then at the end of it, because of the sheer numbers, they get a well, thank you, but sorry,
not worth it.
Yeah. So, which is probably something to do with as I say, in America, you can there's examples in America of people with, say, 500 victims. You know, they all get, you know, they don't get. You don't get isolated. You don't get sort of left on the sidelines. You all get treated. So that's one of the things. You know, that's out of my hands, but that's something for the legal system that should be looking at.
You spoke about Manchester City and mentioned Crewe. What has Crewe's response been like? Because obviously they've been heavily involved in these accusations and stuff. Yeah, has their response been satisfactory at all?
No, Crewe have been awful. Crewe in a way, Crewe have kept Man City out of the headlines, and Man City are the bigger club, obviously, you know.
Yeah.
But Crewe have been so hard faced, and Crewe pulled the shutters down straight away. They, to be fair to City, City did reach out to a lot of the victims. They showed a kind of human side before, you know. I'm talking about before this High Court trial. Crewe were just so kind of like they didn't want to know. They you know. They were just really, really hard-faced and unpleasant about it, and it took them a long time before they've actually now paid out to the victims from who've been suing them. I think there's still a few more outstanding, but it wasn't until their previous chairman John Bowler left that their attitude seems to have changed in terms of like showing a more human touch, because John Bowler's attitude was very much like, you know, we are Crewe. Do not step on our forecourt, you know. Very, very strange kind of, and also very weird because, you know, I grew up thinking Crewe were like this sort of, you know, second favourite club. And
they had when I was a kid, I'm similar to you, Daniel, and they had that reputation. You get youngsters who've not made it, and you know, the Robbie Savages or Rob Jones or David Platts of this world, turn them into good players, and you know, everyone sort of likes them. Plucky little Crewe, and just horrific.
And as I say, the. Don't really want to have a go at fans and stuff, but I'm sure there's plenty of. Well, no, there's lots of good Crewe fans who are horrified by it and everything, but just, you know, again, the cesspit of social media, you know, basically, you know, so I've been targeted as the guy who broke the story because the people didn't want the story out there because it's derailed.
Indictment on their club.
So basically, people's priorities are skewed, aren't they? So, like I say, forget me, and I've seen Andy Woodward's had, you know, not just Andy, of you know, people having a go at them and
having a go at abuse victims. That's a real low point.
Yeah, I know, exactly. But that's what happens, isn't it? So
yeah, it is. But you know, well done on all your work on that, because it's been amazing. It's something I've been following since you first broke it, and like I said, I was at the Midland and speaking to some of those people. It's been, you know, a story that unfortunately needs to be told. I'm glad it has been told. Just moving on slightly to completely different. I say slightly different, completely different. I was reading a piece you wrote about Amanda Stavely. Is that how you pronounce her name? And it featured there was a small part that featured my favourite character in football, Gary Cook, who I used to love, just for the comedy reasons when he was at City. Just quickly on Newcastle, can you see them challenging at the very top when you look at the money they've got and the place they're coming from? Because some people are saying that amount of money, they're going to be another Man City or another Chelsea or another PSG, and then others are saying, well, actually, because there's the Premier League are fighting against it, there's these sort of restrictions in place, they might not, or it might take them a very long time.
Yeah, well, I think they've said themselves, they're not going to come in like City did.
Yeah, which
was, City were splurging. I mean, it was ludicrous in that first week. They were literally just throwing out bids for anyone.
Yeah.
They just wanted any elite player in the world. They just had it was like a scattergun approach. Yeah. So I don't think that's. And even with City, so that was 2008. It took City 4 years, isn't it? So in 5 years' time, it's hard to say. And also, we're kind of ingrained into this mentality, which I suppose we were with City a bit as well. You kind of think, well, it's Newcastle, isn't it? They'll find a way to cock it up.
I said that. I
have no belief.
Careful. I said that about City.
I won't get too excited.
I thought that about City, and I mean, to be fair to City, it's not just the team that City have done well. When you've got that, City's complex. That whole kind of, you go up there and like you look at United and like United sort of swapping City have got a second little stadium, and it looks great, doesn't it? When you drive up between the two, and then you compare it to United. United are sort of like renting, where you're going to rent the Altrincham and Lee and all these.
Yeah,
Harrison's old.
To watch under 23s.
But then United have got all that land round Old Trafford that basically they don't seem to do much with. If that was an ambitious. Everyone goes on about the kind of like the roof leak, and it's become a bit of a cliche now. But I always think like, why don't you put up a little stadium for the reserves or something? Because that's what Barcelona have got one. City have done it, and I believe that's City trained there as well.
Yeah.
So I remember when Carrington opened, we've gone off from Newcastle, haven't we? But I
No,
remember
it's good. It's good because it's true. It's relevant.
I remember when
This is my
Carrington opened, thinking, "Wow, this is the bee's knees." You know, it's not just you go to City now. You just think they're so far ahead of United in every respect. Not just City though. I mean, Leicester's training grounds, now dwarfs United's. It's so this comes back to what we were talking about earlier about United's problems. A lot of it. It's not just Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and the team, and they seem to me to have been left behind in many ways. And but anyway, Newcastle.
No, I'm glad you turned it to United because that is my point. It is relevant.
It is relevant because I did mention that United are now in danger, I think, of going through that little bit of period where years go by and by, you fall slightly further behind incrementally every single year. Before you know it, Liverpool, City and Chelsea are miles ahead.
Yeah.
We've gone 2 decades without winning the Premier League, and then it all looks very daunting in terms of coming back. And that's why United need to look at things now and need to act really quickly, especially if Newcastle become a force as well. Because we are mentioning about academies and training pitches. That is meant to be some of the focus from the Newcastle owners, actually, that they want to improve the academy. They want to make reserve stadiums, academy stadiums, so that they can become... They want to do it the right way, from what it sounds like. I don't think they are going to be spending a lot of cash. As you said, there's a transitional period in it. Like City weren't juggernauts straight away. They had to go through... Did you have to go through like the Alano?
The Rocky Santa Cruz era, whatever you call it.
And Robinho.
You have to kind of go up from being... So Newcastle, they kind of finish about average, about 14th or whatever, don't they? So you have to then make that step up to kind of like, okay, can we go up from being 15th to a kind of a top 6, top 7? Then it's like kind of, can you... And then it's like, as I say, it took City a few years, didn't it? And, City had a few false starts, didn't they, and stuff. But then you kind of, I have to say, City have overall not just they've done. It's a very, very slick operation now. City. It's kind of it's kind of slightly. I spoke to someone who used to work there the other day, and she was saying about how faceless it was, and it kind of is in a way. They've kind of become a bit like everything they always used to say they didn't want to be, which is basically the different to United, because United have got that kind of fan base and everything, but they've become this kind of like slightly almost faceless kind of, they've got like this sort of place you imagine like they've got fingerprint recognition and they'll walk around in the City Blazers and you're sort of looking there and thinking, I've been up here 25 years and it's like, I don't actually recognise anyone anymore. It's like kind of, and nobody's got time to stop and stuff. It's one of those, if you know what I mean, whereas, I used to go to Platt Lane where City used to train years ago, and when I first came up to Manchester, and like every player would stop and have a chat, and they were so, but again, they were third division. No, they were slapstick 11, weren't they? It's like it's
a shame because I miss the days when City, were at Main Road and they were in the third tier, and we could have a proper laugh at them, and now it's like, it's just...
you couldn't get City in. So I came up with the Guardian. You couldn't get City in the papers then.
Really?
I'd go to press conferences. Well, first of all, I was free.
Can't get them out now.
I know, but I was freelancing first of all, and it was me and a guy called Ian Whittle,
right,
and. So we worked for an agency called Teamwork, and so like we'd try and get interest in like a Friday press conference, and like all the papers would be like, no, so we'd go anyway, and it'd be us, Radio Manchester, and sometimes the MEN, and basically it'd be done in Joe Royal's office or something, which would be like a quarter the size of this room, because it'd just be basically like 3 of us sat behind his desk, and it's like they'd be playing Lincoln or Macclesfield or something, and it was like you just. So it's a completely different club.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, they've grown a little bit, haven't they, since those days. Daniel, could have chatted to you forever. Really, it's just, not even scratch the surface and half the things I wanted to talk about. But I realise you've got other things to do, so we'll wrap it up there. Make sure you are checking out Daniel at The Athletic, checking out all his articles and his work there. It's great. Publication, you subscribe. I think there's got some offers on. There's a link in the description where you can subscribe. What's next for you? What have you got planned?
Trying to find out what's going on with Solskjaer.
If you hear anything, let us know. Drop me a message. And,
as you say, I mean, Laurie's very well connected, and sounds like I think there's a bit of a for now element to it, but
Yeah.
it sounds safe for now. And to be honest, before I just came in, Sky had picked it up, I think.
We did a live,
Yeah,
and I started just as we were going live. I started with Laurie's piece, and just as we were going live, the Sky had it as well, obviously off the back of his work.
It's not a secret. Conte wants it. People are employed to get those messages out.
Yeah.
Zidane would. I wonder whether Zidane might actually be a better fit for United than
There's a lot of talk that Zidane has his kind of no interest in the Premier League kind of feel. He doesn't know English. He's like,
it's hard. As I say, there's always people around managers who normally. He's a bit trickier.
Yeah.
Or certainly for. Certainly as he hasn't ever worked in the Premier League before, so there's not really the relationships there. So it's kind of harder to find out what his next ambition is or what he wants. Whereas, there's, the timing would be bad. I know Mancini would love to come back to the Premier League. He's wanted to for years.
Could that happen, do you think?
Well, I can't see. I think like Mancini's stock at the moment. He's just won Euros.
He's done his
And
job.
he is a manager who won the
but-
Premier League title. I know he did it with City,
But Mancini tried to. Mancini's been ignored by clubs like Spurs for years. He's tried because to be fair, his last year at Man City, it was one of those were classic. It was quite Mourinho-esque. Like the players ended up hating him. They were celebrating when he'd gone. He still won the league. He won the FA Cup. He did a brilliant job there. He was the guy. We're talking about like City couldn't take that little lead. He was the guy that did that.
Yeah.
And he came in, wasn't fazed by United at all. Did that to Fergie on the touchline. Said I'm going to do that, which meant bring down the ticker banner.
Yeah, I remember that
Did
banner.
Yeah, so he did.
Do you remember that? Do you remember that, the banner?
Yeah, I do.
So he did his He did it. He's kept to his word.
Yeah.
He won the league, and then he's not been able to get a job back in the Premier League. It's
Maybe now, like you say, with what's happened with Italy,
Well, but the
That
problem
might
is though that
change the school
I think
of thought.
he'd be a bit of a traitor, wouldn't he, if he gave up Italy with a World Cup in 13 months. So I think I kind of think he can't. I think he'd be torn because the chance to manage Man United, yes, I know I'm with United fans, but Man United is Man. These jobs don't come up often, and sometimes it's about timing and like. This is why it might never come for Pochettino. I think it'll always be a regret for Pochettino if it doesn't, because he's like been so close, 2 or 3 times, and it's an amazing job. And the manager who gets it right after Fergie, that man, can you imagine like his stock or like his popularity? It's like he'd be a god, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he would.
So I think Mancini would be looking at it thinking, I wish it was in 14 months' time because. But I don't know whether fans would want.
Saying that in 14 months' time, we might be, someone
might be back
have,
in.
yeah, someone have replaced Ollie, and then they'll have been
yeah.
sat by then.
Yeah.
So maybe Mancini will get another chance in 2020, end of 2020.
It's funny because his name never comes up though. His name.
It's funny. The only reason he's,
I think his
name.
name were on the betting.
Was it?
The betting odds,
Because
they were.
it's weird because at the ground the other week, not for the Liverpool game. I can't remember which game it was. It might have been for Villarreal. We were having a chat in the stand, and someone was saying Mancini, and a few people were saying, you know what? Despite the City thing, that's not a bad shout because of what he's won.
But in that time between leaving City and winning the Euros, he went for jobs, and he obviously didn't get anywhere near them. So so Arsenal.
It's crazy, right, when you've won the Premier League.
So Arsenal went for Arteta, and you'd think, well, look at Arteta's CV compared to Mancini and stuff. Whether they were going for the
Pep's assistant.
But it's unknown that, isn't it?
Yeah,
you don't. I always think with someone when they're assistant, you earlier mentioned there some of the assistants that Fergie had. He had like Carlos Queiroz, for example, and
It was weird.
And Rennie Merlenstein. I know he was more of a coach and assistant, but good coaches who've not always succeeded. Steve McLaren, who've had patchy records as managers. You just don't know, do you?
Well, it's weird though because
how?
that actually seemed to be his selling point, and it seemed like people just gave him a lot of cachet just because he was Pep's assistant, which was the weird.
And it helps that he obviously beat Pep early doors, didn't he?
Yeah, he had a good start. And also, if it depends if they're going for that kind of Solskjaer type, building the mentality. And to be fair, it does give you, if Pep talks you up, which he does, and you're sitting in the dugout next to Pep, that does give you can see why chief execs are looking at that thinking, God, But equally, the point being, like, why are they, you know, they went to war with City almost to get, you know, they snuck him out sort of like with midnight meetings and stuff. I never understood why English football turned its back on Mancini big time. You know, like, it's won the league. It's like, you know,
that could be your next piece. That.
I've already written it.
Oh, have you?
That's a plug.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, make sure you check
I wrote it and nobody backed me up. Nobody.
There you go. Make sure you're checking out Daniel on the Fledge. Thanks for coming on the channel,
Pleasure.
Daniel. It was a pleasure chatting to you. Make sure you're checking out Ronaldo Brown 98.
You remembered?
Yes, I remembered. You know where to find me. Make sure you're subscribing to The Athletic and subscribing to this channel as well. Let's get to 700,000 subscribers by the end of the season. This has been the Tier 1 Transfer Podcast. Thanks for watching.